Your life at every level of surviving the Amazon alone. You have been in the jungle for 19 days. You are going to make it out. The river found you, or you found the river, and the rescue boat is coming, and you are going to survive. But here is what the rescuers are about to tell you, that you are not prepared to hear. The person who kept you alive, the one whose voice you heard when the decisions mattered, whose presence stopped you lying down on day 11 when lying down would have meant not getting up, was not there, was never there, has never been anywhere. You were alone for 19 days, and something your mind built from whatever it had available kept you alive in the absence of anyone real. But to understand how you got to the river, we need to go back to the beginning. Level 1. The first night. You were not supposed to be alone. The group separated in the late afternoon when the trail dissolved into nothing and the canopy closed and the light went in a way it only goes in dense jungle. Not gradually, not like dusk, but categorically, like a switch. You called. You waited. You called again. The jungle absorbed all three and returned nothing. By the time you accepted that no one was coming back before dark, you had approximately 40 minutes of usable light and no plan beyond the next 10 minutes. You built a platform. Not well, not properly, just enough to get yourself off the ground, because the ground in the Amazon at night is where the things that can kill you in an hour do their best work. You used what you had: a jacket, a knife, 2 energy bars, a water bottle with about a third left, and a phone with no signal and 11% battery that you turned off immediately because 11% is a number you protect. The platform held. You did not sleep. The Amazon at night is the loudest environment most people will ever not sleep in. The insect density, the canopy drip, the specific calls of nocturnal animals that your brain cannot categorize and therefore cannot dismiss as harmless. You lay on your platform and you listened to all of it and you did not sleep and you waited for the light. At some point in the second half of the night, a voice arrived, not external, your own voice, internal, the way the mind talks to itself when it needs to think through something. The voice said, "When the light comes, find water." That's the first problem. Everything else is the second problem. You agreed with the voice. It seemed reasonable. It seemed like exactly the right priority. You did not yet notice that the voice had a quality your own internal monologue does not normally have. A patience, a certainty, a quality of knowing the answer before the question was finished. Level 2, the water problem. Day 2 and 3. The Amazon is not a water scarcity environment. Water is everywhere. Water falls from the canopy in heavy drops from the previous night's rain. Water collects in the cups of broad leaves. Water runs in streams and tributaries in every direction. The problem is that almost none of it is safe to drink without treatment you do not have. The companion. You had begun to think of the voice as a companion by day 2, had given it a quality of presence without examining why, told you which sources were viable. Rainwater collected directly from leaves was the first option. Moving water over rocks was safer than still water. Avoid anything with visible algae. Avoid anything that smells of sulfur. Drink slowly, more slowly than your body is demanding. The companion's advice was always correct. You knew this because you had some baseline wilderness knowledge, and everything the companion said aligned with it, extended it, filled in the gaps your anxiety was creating. By day 3, you had a reliable water routine. You drank in the mornings when the leaf collection was highest. You identified a small moving stream near your second shelter, and you used it carefully. You were not yet in serious physical distress. The companion seemed satisfied. That was the word your mind used, satisfied, as if the companion had an emotional register. You did not examine this. Level 3, the navigation problem, days 4 through 7. The Amazon canopy is between 20 and 40 meters above the forest floor. For 4 of the 7 days of level 3, you did not see the sky. Not in glimpses, not partially. The canopy was complete, and the sun was a theoretical concept that had no bearing on your ability to determine direction. Your phone's compass function worked without signal. The battery was at 9%, and you used it in 30-second intervals twice a day, and then turned it back off. The companion told you to follow the water. Not toward water, with water. Downstream. Every drainage in the Amazon basin moves eventually toward a larger waterway, and larger waterways move eventually toward navigable rivers, and navigable rivers have traffic. This is correct. This is what any wilderness survival resource would tell you. But the companion knew it without being asked, and told it to you before your degrading cognition reached it on its own, which was the service the companion was providing that you were not yet naming accurately. On day 6, you found a gap in the canopy where a large tree had fallen, and you saw stars for 40 minutes. The companion named them. Crux, Southern Cross, the bearing you needed. You moved by those stars for 3 hours before the clouds returned, and then you stopped and built another platform, and the companion told you to sleep, and for the first time in 6 days you did. You slept for 9 hours. When you woke, the companion was there. Of course, the companion was there. The companion was always there. You had not yet asked yourself why. Level 4. The physical collapse. Days 8 through 12. On day 8, you ran out of the 2 energy bars and entered the caloric deficit that would define the rest of the survival. The Amazon is not a food scarcity environment for someone who knows what they are doing. You did not know what you were doing. You knew the general categories: protein from insects, carbohydrate from certain palm hearts, fruit that birds had eaten from recently as a safety indicator. But the knowledge was imprecise, and the caloric yield was insufficient, and by day 10, your body was doing the arithmetic of starvation in ways you could feel in your cognition before you could feel it in your muscles. On day 10, you sat down in the middle of walking and could not immediately identify a reason to stand up again. The companion spoke. Not about survival, not about water or direction or shelter. The companion asked you about home, asked you what you were going to eat when you got back, asked you about a specific meal, a specific place, a specific person waiting. The companion knew these things. You provided them, apparently, in an exchange you barely remember, because your blood glucose was low enough that your memory of day 10 is fragmentary. But you stood up. You kept walking. On day 11, you fell and cut your left forearm on something, and the cut was deep enough to require attention. You could not properly give it, and it began to show signs of infection by day 12. The companion told you which leaves had documented antibacterial properties. You applied them. Whether they worked or whether the infection resolved on its own, you cannot say. But it resolved. The companion was doing more of the deciding now. You were following instructions. This felt like the right arrangement given the circumstances. You did not examine the circumstances carefully enough to notice what the arrangement implied. Level 5. The signal. Days 13 through 18. On day 13, you found the river. Not a stream, not a tributary, a river. 30 meters across, brown with sediment, moving at a pace that suggested significant drainage upstream. The companion said, "Follow it downstream. Do not cross it. Do not leave it. Stay within sight of the bank. The river is the signal now." You followed it. For 6 days you followed it. The physical state by day 13 was significant muscle loss, the infection on your arm resolving, but leaving a weakness in the left grip, a skin condition from constant moisture exposure that made movement painful in the mornings until the skin warmed, and a cognitive state that you can only describe retrospectively as functional in the way that a phone at 3% battery is functional. Performing the essential operations and nothing else. The non-essential processes already shut down. The companion was essential. The companion was the most essential process running. The companion told you when to rest, told you when the bank was getting too steep and you needed to move inland briefly, told you when the sound of the river changed pitch in a way that indicated rapids ahead worth scouting before committing to the bank. On day 15, you passed a section of river that had obvious signs of human activity: cut vegetation, an old fire site, a piece of blue plastic caught in the roots at the bank. The companion told you this meant habitation within a reasonable distance downstream. Keep moving. You kept moving. On day 17, you heard a motor, distant, upstream, moving away. You did not have the energy to call out. The companion told you to build a signal fire. You built one from wet wood and green leaves, and it produced a column of dark smoke that you maintained for 4 hours before the wood ran out. On day 18, you heard the motor again, closer, and this time you called out, and this time the sound changed. Level 6, the rescue and the twist. Day 19. They pulled you from the bank at a section of river where you had been sitting for 3 hours because the companion had told you to sit and wait, and your body had agreed without consulting the rest of you. There were 3 people in the rescue boat. They gave you water and a foil blanket, and one of them spoke enough of your language to ask the questions. Were you injured? Were you alone? You answered the first question accurately. You answered the second question. No. You described the companion. You described where the companion had been sitting when the boat arrived. One of the rescuers looked at the bank where you indicated, then looked at the others. You were alone when we found you, he said carefully, in the way that people use carefully, when they are not sure of the cognitive state of the person they are speaking to. You were alone on the bank. We watched you for several minutes before approaching. There was no one with you. There has been no one with you. You were alone when you entered the river section. The search team's records indicate you separated from your group on day 1. No other member of your group entered this sector. You have been alone for 19 days. The companion was not there, has not been there. The companion was a solution your mind generated to a problem that human cognition encounters under conditions of sufficient isolation and sufficient stress. The problem of needing an external authority to make decisions when the self's decision-making capacity has degraded below the threshold required to trust it. Your mind took the knowledge you had, the experience you had, the voice you use when you are thinking most clearly, and it gave that voice a face and a name and a seat next to you on the platform and a presence across 19 days of jungle, because the alternative, being alone with a degraded self in an environment that required good decisions to survive, was a problem your cognition could not solve. So it solved it differently. It made you not alone. The part of you that could still think gave itself a body and sat down beside the part of you that couldn't and kept you moving. Every correct decision was yours. Every piece of knowledge was yours. The companion knew the stars because you knew the stars. The companion knew which leaves had antibacterial properties because you had read that once and stored it somewhere you couldn't consciously access. The companion asked you about home on day 10 because you needed to be asked about home on day 10, and the only person available to ask was you. You sit in the rescue boat, wrapped in the foil blanket that you still cannot feel properly, and you think about the companion. You think about the last thing the companion said, which was, "Sit here and wait, and they will come." You think about the 19 days of company you had in an environment that should have been total solitude. You think about what it means that the most reliable presence in the hardest 19 days of your life was a part of yourself you didn't know you had until you needed it badly enough that your mind invented a way to introduce you. The rescuers are asking more questions. You answer them. You are going to be fine. You were always going to be fine. Something made sure of it. And the question you will spend a long time after this trying to answer is whether the something that made sure of it was you or wasn't, and whether that distinction matters as much as it seemed to. Before you spent 19 days in the jungle being kept alive by the part of yourself that showed up when you couldn't.